Welcome to our MJA Inc. Investigations podcast, the series Deep into the Woods, Missing Persons, Unsolved Crimes, and the Does. This is episode 15. The episode is about two sets of sisters who just vanished without a trace. My name is Mark, and I am your host for tonight's podcast. Let's get started with a quote. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. Confucius. Two sisters missing from Arizona. On July 31st, 1974, 13-year-old Jackie Leslie and her older sister, 15-year-old Cynthia Leslie, just vanished without a trace. They went missing from Mesa, Arizona, located in Maricopa County. The sisters was last seen walking on July 31st, 1974. They were headed to a friend's house, which was located 3 blocks away from their own residence in the Desert Sands Mobile Home Park in East Mesa, Arizona. They had just moved there a month earlier from Page, Arizona, so that their father, who was suffering from terminal cancer, could be closer to the hospital. Both girls was last seen walking on Baseline Road near Power Road. They told their mother that they were scheduled to babysit, but she learned afterwards that they had planned to attend a party. Cindy likely was meeting a boy her father had forbidden her to see. Teenagers who attended the party were questioned more than once. Their stories conflicted. One teenager said the sisters did show up at the party. Others said they didn't. Neither Cindy nor her sister have been heard from since. In the weeks following the girls' disappearance, family members and sheriff deputies searched orange groves and cotton fields. These fields have been replaced by subdivisions, apartments, theaters, and stores. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, we will talk about the other case, the two sisters who vanished from Maryland. Welcome back to our MJA podcast. Two sisters missing from Maryland. On March 25th, 1975, 10-year-old Catherine Lyon and her older sister, 12-year-old Sheila Lyon, just vanished without a trace. They went missing from Wheaton, Maryland, located in Montgomery County. Sheila and her younger sister Catherine departed together from their family residence on Pliers Mill Road in Kensington, Maryland on March 25, 1975 between 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. The girls were walking to the Wheaton Plaza Shopping Center in Wheaton, Maryland, which was approximately 1/2 mile from their home. Sheila and Catherine were on spring break from school and wanted to see the Easter exhibits at the mall as well as have lunch at the Orange Bowl restaurant. A neighborhood child saw the girls outside the restaurant at approximately 1300 hours. He told investigators that the sisters were speaking to an unidentified middle-aged man wearing a brown suit. The man was carrying a briefcase with a tape recorder inside. There were also other children around who were speaking into the microphone he was holding. The witness description of the man led authorities to view the unknown person as a prime suspect in the Lyon sisters' case, and a sketch of the individual was created. The girl's older brother saw them inside the Orange Bowl restaurant eating pizza together at approximately 1400 hours. A friend stated that the girls were walking westward down Drum Avenue near Devon Street at approximately 1430 to 1500 hours. This would have been one of the most direct routes to their home on Pliers Mill Road from the mall, and was the final confirmed sighting of the sisters. When Sheila and Catherine didn't return to the residence by 1900 hours, authorities were summoned and an extensive search was conducted. No evidence of the Lyon sisters' whereabouts could be located. The girls had less than $4 between them when they left home. After eating lunch, they would have only had some change left in their pockets. A witness in Virginia reported seeing two girls resembling Sheila and Catherine in the rear of a 1968 beige Ford station wagon on April 7, 1975. The witness stated that the girls were observed bound and gagged in the vehicle at approximately 7:30 p.m. that day. The driver of the station wagon resembled the man seen questioning children at the Orange Bowl restaurant the day the sisters vanished. When a driver spotted the witness tailing him, he ran a red light and sped west on Route 234 towards Interstate 66 in Virginia. The girls' disappearances remain unsolved. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return, our first guest on tonight's podcast will be Dan. Welcome, Dan, to our MJA podcast. This is episode 15, part 1. This episode is about two sets of missing sisters. How are you tonight, Dan?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back here with you, styling and profiling.
Yeah, that's what we need. It's been a while. And this episode is about two missing sisters from Arizona and two sisters missing from Maryland. Now, speaking about the Arizona case, do you think the Leslie sisters left on their own free will?
You know, it's hard to say because there are various stories about whether or not they actually made it to the party they were scheduled to go to. I would say it's more likely they left of their own volition and then something happened which led to their death. Maybe a younger boy made a sexual advance or something like that, and that's what led to their disappearance. But it's hard to say because with all the witnesses, there are overlapping statements and nothing could be for certain.
And do you think just moving to a new town made them homesick?
Oh, I'm sure it did. They're far away from all their friends. Plus, they're there not primarily under great circumstances. Their father being terminally ill, that's got to only add to what they're feeling. Because right now they feel isolated, and the only family member that they moved there to be with now passed away. So that had to be made them feel very isolated, homesick, just like it would with anybody.
And do you think the boy had something to do with the 15-year-old Leslie disappearance?
Again, I don't know because I can only speculate. I can say that her father didn't want her to see that boy for one reason or another. I know as a father, you've probably told your daughters that very same thing because especially when they're 15 and stuff like that, they want to date older guys and start riding around in cars. And I'm sure you've had to give your daughters the talk over the years about, not doing stuff like that and always being careful when you do. But I didn't read anything about the mystery boy. Do you know anything more about him that the
No,
report didn't say?
no, because the police has never released any details on none of the witnesses they talked to. There's even been people that's done the Freedom of Information Act, and that was all null and void for some reason, and which a lot of people don't understand that. So there's not too much
That's
information on the party itself, the people who attended the party, and the so-called boy she liked. And it seems that some of the people at the party was confused. Some people said the girls did show up, and others say they didn't. So what would be some of the reasons these teenagers lied?
Well, like we talked about just a second ago, if she's seeing an older boy at a party, that'd be something her father was against. With teenagers, of course, parties always involve drugs and alcohol and sex and rock and roll and everything you want to keep your kids away from. But, there's just not a leash long enough in the world. But maybe because they were feeling isolated, like we talked about also before, they were feeling lonely in a new place. So maybe, sneaking off to a party they thought would be a good way for them to go out and meet new people in a new area.
And on the way to the party, do you think they met with foul play before they arrived to the party, if they did?
If they were abducted or taken in by a stranger for a ride to the party, it's certainly possible. I know they were last seen only a few blocks away from their home. I believe they were on foot.
Yes, they were.
So it's possible that they got into a car with either a stranger or somebody they knew intimately that they were going to the same place, and they were never seen again.
And now on to the next case. Two sisters missing from Maryland. If you was 10 or 12 years old and had the run of the town, what would you typically do?
I'd eat ice cream until I threw up, and then eat more ice cream.
And a lot of people seen them around town, but no one saw where they ended up. I wonder why. And do you have any revelations about that? Why nobody seen where they ended up?
Well, it's hard to say because I'm sure, know that, eyewitness statements are often not that credible. So can they really be sure that the two girls are who they saw? Maybe they were avoiding their parents, or maybe they were involved in something they shouldn't have been involved with, so they were keeping things on the down low. I'm not sure why no one saw where they would have ended up, but the variety of missing stories lends you hope about solving the case, because you at least have some witness leads on where they might be, unlike the last case where we discussed where they just disappeared and were kind of never seen again. That leaves you with, very little hope because you don't have a lot to go on.
And could it be the abductor found a way to isolate them from the others?
Yeah, abductors are masters at that. Profile criminals, especially ones who prey on children, are master profilers. They can identify ways to get you alone for just that split second. And then they know just how to identify the ones who are lonely and kind of separate and isolate them from the pack. They often use a ruse. Remember the case of Ted Bundy, he used the broken arm ruse. There's also people, they'll use the lost pet ruse, or I got lost ruse, or I'm looking for directions. So when you're a young kid, you tend to be more trusting of people who offer you ice cream or candy or treats. And there have been several abductors that try things like that because they know little kids are more vulnerable, whereas older kids, they might be a little more suspicious of a man in a strange man.
And could it be the Lyon sisters walked on ahead and the guy followed them?
Sure, it could be. Again, profile criminals or master profilers looking for that one split second where the victim is alone, and then that's when they make their move. That's why every parent knows it's so important to watch your kids, especially when they're young, all the time, because especially in public areas, it's easy to turn away just for a moment or two, and then they're gone. That's also why the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children places a large emphasis on knowing what your kids are wearing every day when they leave the house. Because just knowing the clothing can turn into an invaluable piece of evidence later when they're going back and searching for evidence.
And witnesses stated they seen the Lyon sisters in a 1968 beige Ford station wagon on April 7, 1975. The witness stated that the girls was observed bound and gagged in the vehicle at approximately 7:30 p.m. on that day. Do you think the witnesses are credible and they did in fact see the Lyon sisters?
Well, anytime you have a more detailed description, like the one of the vehicle you just described, I would lend to it as more credible. Because a lot of people, like we just talked about, with eyewitness identification, they'll say maybe they saw this or but when they describe the make and model of the car and then say they saw the two sisters bound and gagged, especially if you see two people bound and gagged, you're going to take a closer look at them. So based on the descriptiveness of the statement they gave, I would lend it as more credible than maybe statements in some other cases.
Okay. And do you have anything to add about these cases?
Even though they're separated by the entire country, it's amazing to me how similar the stories are of the two sisters, abducted just a few miles away from their home, walking together. They're similar ages, having one older sister and one younger sister. I thought the victimology, given the spaces the two cases share, was really quite incredible. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're big into the serial killers from the 70s and way back then. Was there any serial killers that you know of that maybe were stalking that area?
Oh, well, through the years, yes, there has been different serial killers, and also, yeah, I think it was around the 70s is when the FBI learned that these serial killers don't always stick to the same state. And see, that's another thing they have learned. Okay, just like when they got on the long haul truck drivers, they learned that they committed a crime in the East Coast and then they committed a crime in the West Coast. So anything is possible on that end because, okay, I'll give you a good example. 1988, he was caught in 1988, the child serial killer David E. Penton. We know he would go at 300 miles plus with his victims and dump them. And his MO was he would pick a place, dig a hole, go and kidnap him a child female victim, beat it back to the hole, do the dirty deed, and throw him in the hole. Okay, and like I said, that's where the distance comes in. We found a case that it was tagged to him, and it was 300 miles from where she come up missing to where she was dumped at. And so, yes, in the 70s, that's when a lot of law enforcement agencies learned that the serial killers aren't just isolated to one area.
And that's where the FBI plays such a big part because of the ability they can use once you cross them jurisdictional boundaries. But unfortunately, even with all the modern technology we have in today's society, it still happens just the same way where police have trouble connecting victims because they were dumped a lot further from where they were abducted. But that's where systems like VICAP and all that really come in handy because they're designed to link those missing persons cases. Of course, the caveat to that is the individual police departments have to fill out the forms and submit them to the FBI.
Right.
So that's one thing the local police departments really have to have together. I know in Canada, for their version of VICAP, it's a requirement for a lot of police departments to submit those forms. So it's a little bit more organized. But without that, like even today, it's hard to do because missing persons reports don't always circulate to all the neighboring counties and states like they need to. But with GPS technology and the cell phones, hopefully it'll become a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more monitored. But like I said, a lot of it comes down to the police needing to fill out the UCRs and all the forms that they get from the FBI so they have more clear and comprehensive data.
Okay. Thanks, Dan, for being on tonight's podcast. We're looking forward to hearing from you again soon. And I have a quote for our listeners. You are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. Les Brown. Always remember, folks, if you ever get bored and have nothing to do, just take a walk deep into the woods. You might be surprised what you might find. That's the end of tonight's podcast. Thanks to all of our listeners and our special guest, Dan. My name is Mark, and I was your host for tonight's show. And good night from Plattsburgh, New York.
Thank you, everyone.